I had to ask those. Okay, there you go.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Okay.
NSA is
Don't say anything you're
listening.
gonna regret.
Okay.
We'll censor it.
nervous.
I'll make
Well,
some
this
review.
way, people who couldn't be here can
Yeah.
hear your presentation, Will.
All right. Do we want to start?
yes.
I mean, yeah, let's
All
get
right.
it going.
I mean, should we
All
send out
right.
a little notification to the
You
library?
know, I've sent out like 5 notifications. And
Okay.
so,
Well,
Got it.
it's their loss because you
oh
guys.
no, we had 13
so excited.
confirmed. We had 13 confirmed people. So I'm sure there are going to be a few more joining.
I'll make
All
sure
I'm
to
saying
include this in the recording.
is get ready because we're about to launch into ancient Norse Scandinavia. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me share
who's
my
the
screen.
Scandinavian people?
Let me share my screen.
I'm muting
Okay.
you, Monica.
Presenter. All right, you disable
Rebecca's-
screen share, Chris. Mhm.
Screen share. One participant can share at a time. Advanced sharing options. All participants. How about that?
I'd say one participant could share at a time.
There's only one. Can you do it now?
Let me try. All
There
right.
you go.
A Brief History of the Vikings by William Colligan. Shout out Zoe Crone for some extra help. Woo woo. All right. So a bit of an overview. Oh man, come on, guys. All right, maybe. All right, a bit of an overview. So we're gonna start with a quick Norse myth. Hopefully it's gonna be quick. It's me telling the story, so who knows. Then we're going to launch into a bit of an overview on Viking society, daily life and politics. A brief overview of just kind of like the Viking history and Viking raiding, which is, like attacks and invasions on the shores of Normandy and England, Ireland, and Scotland, specifically. Then we're going to move into some notable Viking heroes and some fun facts I picked up along the way. And if we have time and people are into it, we'll do a quick closing myth, to bring it all full circle. So imagine a world, just a big, vast expanse of nothingness, right? And I mean, I don't know what we'll name it or anything like that, but let's call it Gnunga Gap. So Gnunga Gap is this ever-expanding void, right, of nothingness. And to the north, there's a land of only ice and frost and fog called Nilfheim. And to the south, there's Muspelheim, which is a land of fire and brimstone and smoke. And at the very tip of Nilfheim is a fountain called Velgelmir. And Velgelmir expounds 11 rivers called the Elivigar, but we'll just call them the 11 rivers, which is the organ to all existence. And as this river has flown down from the top of Nilfheim all the way into the expanse of Gnunga Gap, this vast expanse of nothingness, a chemical reaction starts to form. And it starts to build up. The ice starts to build up and build up and build up into what we'll like to call the scientific term frost blob. And frost blob will be, sitting there and growing and growing and growing. Frost blob is growing. The smoke and the fire from Muspelheim, this land of fire and brimstone, is slowly but surely melting the frost blob. And the droplets of water from the frost blob are slowly dripping in like a stalagmite, type setting. And they are creating a humanoid, the first giant, called Ymir. Additionally, a cow called Audumla is born, but we'll just call her cow, and we'll call Ymir. So as Ymir, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed giant, begins to fall asleep for the first night, he sweats out 2 giants from his armpits. And the third giant comes, which is named Thrugelmir. Also, we'll just call him Strength Yeller. Was born out of Ymir's hermaphrodite legs. So Ymir has both penis and a vagina and can procreate another giant. They form the Jotnar. And during this time that the Jotnar are forming, the cow finds a particularly salty piece of ice. And the first day she licks it and she finds some hair. The second day she licks it, she uncovers a head. The third day she licks it, it's a full man. It's a humanoid man. It's another giant. His name is Buri. And Buri marries, or Buri has a son named Bor. And Bor marries Besla, who bear the sons Odin, Vili, and Ve. Now, Odin, Vili, and Ve are growing up, and they're saying, "Hey, screw this stuff. We're Aesir. We're the gods. We outnumber the giants. I don't know what we're doing, and they're pretty mean, and they're pretty old. So we're going to go, and we're going to kill Ymir." And they sneak up on him at night, and they kill him. And this is quoted from the Song of Grimnir in the Poetic Edda from the Yale magazine. "From Ymir's flesh, in the dawning of time was made the earth. From his blood, the raging sea. The rocks from his bones, from his hair, the tree and plants. His skull became the vaulted heaven, and Midgard from his fringed lids," so his eyelashes. "Additionally, the blood of Ymir drowned all the other giants besides 2, who escaped on a boat." So the gods then created Asgard, a beautiful city on, atop of a hill, basically on the plains. And the giants created a land called Jotunheim. 4 dwarves grew out of Ymir's body and hold up the Ymir's skull, which is basically the cap on the world that is protecting Midgard from all the other realms. Additionally, the rest of the dwarves go underground and become incredible smiths and create magical weapons like Thor's hammer and such. Additionally, the sun and the moon are created and are followed by are charioted by 2 beautiful people who are cast out into the sky for being so beautiful, and they're chased by treachery and hate, 2 wolves by the names of Skull and Hati. And as Hati chases the moon, he takes a bite every night, but it replenishes himself. But when Hati finally captures the moon, we will be at the end of the world in Ragnarok. Finally, the Thor and Vili and Ve are walking in Midgard, and they see 2 barren trees, and they say, "This Midgard, these need some people, man." So they fashion the trees, and Thor gives them movement, mind, and intelligence. Vili gives them shape, speech, feelings, and the 5 senses. And Ask and Embla become the first people on Midgard and the creator of the Norse world. Altogether, these create, the 9 realms. And what does this all mean? It basically means, right, like the gods killed the giants, and so they're both a part of creation. And we know that in Ragnarok, the gods will fight the giants. So we basically need to appease both and give praise to both, because we need to be the balance between them. So that is the creation myth of Norse mythology. And now we're going to shoot into Viking society. So Vikings are just a group of people, right? The Vikings is not a name. It's just the people from Denmark, Sweden, and Norway from 800 to 1066, basically. And they typically were, most Vikings are largely pastoral, subsistence living, live in long houses, with multiple other families, around 10 to 20 people, and the men work the farm and the women work inside, and all the duties inside. And, they have craftsmen on their plots that also, they trade with for land or for goods. There's a couple of social classes that order Viking society. The Jarls are the chieftains, and essentially what a Jarl is somebody that has amassed wealth, and can curry favor with others by giving out his wealth. So the main goal of him is to create goodwill amongst his supporters by giving them these like golden bangles for good deeds, for helping him on raids, for anything. And in turn, those warriors and farmers and other people, make him the leader. So and a Jarl can be deposed at any time. If somebody has more money, you're gone. So it's pretty interesting. Most Viking society, they're carls, right? And carls are your freemen, your blacksmiths, your farmers, just your freemen and landowners. A massive part of Viking society, and basically the backbone to it as well, was the slave trade and slaves in general. And slaves didn't have any rights besides, the right of their owner, but they could gain freedom. And it's recorded in Viking law that if a slave fought off Norwegian invaders with his master, he would automatically be guaranteed his freedom. Additionally, the slave trade was like $1 billion industry for the Vikings, and so far as they traveled all the way to the Caspian Sea, to essentially get as many people as they could. So let's not glorify the Vikings and who they are, because they are not the greatest. So, and the role of women was domestic, most of the time, but they could manage the family finances. They could run the farm in their husband's absence, and in widowhood, they could be rich and important landowners. So there was a level of freedom not known by other, European women that were otherwise, seen within Viking society. So, not the greatest, but not the worst in terms of, how they treated women in the society. Additionally, it's also, a little fun fact, they've done fossil records on teeth, and women and men were actually, they both had the same levels of nutrition, which is, not really seen a lot in other Viking societies. So the last thing we're going to talk about in the Viking society is their politics, which is literally called things, which means assembly. And it was an assembly of all the landowners who would come together in a festival type style, gossip, trade, eat and drink and be merry, and also settle any court differences. And the prosecutor, if they won, would have to settle that debt. The only time the prosecutor wouldn't have to settle that debt is if somebody was a murderer or a rapist and became known as what is called an outlaw. And that would mean that they have no protections under any law, and they're an outcast. So they can basically be killed by anybody. So the prosecutor doesn't have to kill them. Right when they get called an outlaw, everybody can just jump on them. So, it was a pretty interesting thing that they don't have an executive branch, but they are all the judicial and, Congress. And another fun fact, the parliament today in Iceland is still called an Althing, which is, pretty interesting.
Hey, Will, let me just stop you for a second, just to remind everybody to post questions in chat if you have them, and we'll go over those. Will, do you want to answer them as they go, or do you want to answer them at the end?
I'll answer them later, because I'm trying to keep it concise and tight. I'm trying to adhere to my timer. So what are the motivations for raiding? Why did they leave? I mean, a lot of people think, population expands. We need more places for more people, but there are, riches and fame, to create a better place for you in Viking society to have a jarldom. and to ascend to a throne. Another thing was there's a record that there was not a lot of eligible women in Viking society. So raiding was a way to either get a wife or get enough money to pay for a wife. And then, you know, we got to mention, we're always going to mention it. There is a massive need for slaves and a massive market for slaves at this time throughout the East and, you know, Europe and within their own Viking society, because they are a pastoral society. So, and then some people say to crush the encroaching spread of Christianity. I don't even think they had any concept of that, but that's another thing. So when did it start? How did it happen? The first major documented raid in the Viking world, which caught Europe's attention, is at Lindisfarne. It's at St. Cuthbert's Cathedral, and it was, you know, a very brutal time. It was a very brutal raid, and, you know, monks and talk about the blood in the church and all that stuff. And St. Cuthbert Cathedral was a massive, you know, kind of birth of Christianity in England. So it really meant a lot. Another thing that's interesting is they settled the town of Dublin, which not a lot of people know about. And there was a large, you know, Viking settlement in Dublin before the Irish ever took it back. They actually built the city, and then the Irish took it back from them. The siege of Paris is actually the only time that we hear in recorded history of Ragnar Lothbrok, and they were actually paid a ransom to leave after they sieged the city for 2.5 months after arriving there on Easter. I really want to, you know, kind of discuss the Great Heathen Army, because that's what people really know about. The Great Heathen Army was led by, was the first kind of coordinated effort in a Viking raid. 3,000 men, you know, descended upon England to basically take it over. They said, hey, we've had a couple pieces of the pie. This place has some nice natural resources. We're better than these guys. Let's take the whole thing. The Norse kind of mythology, the sagas say that the sons of Ragnar, Ubba, Halfdan Ragnarsson, Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, and Sigurd the Snake-Eyed were on a revenge tour for their deceased father, Ragnar Lothbrok. And the first person they took and the first city they took was the city of York, who King Aella actually threw Ragnar Lothbrok in a snake pit. But they came back and blood-eagled King Aella, which is when you take somebody and you rip them apart in their back, and you basically take their ribs and make wings out of their ribs. So that's an interesting, you know, torture for you guys to know about. The heathen army takes Mercia, they take East Anglia, and then they split up. And some of them go north of Scotland, the other goes south. And in 873, in the Battle of Edington, King Alfred the Great actually wins a decisive battle against a Viking, Guthrum, and converts him to Christianity, which really kind of stops the Viking conquest of England. And at the same time, in 886, they establish a treaty which sets out a Danelaw land and a certifiable ransom. So if the Vikings attack, you can pay this and they'll leave. So that's an interesting thing. Rollo is granted land by the Franks and established Normandy. I'll come back to that. He was a famous Viking raider and chieftain. Then, you know, you guys all know about Eric the Red and the Viking conquest, not conquest, but discovery of North America and Leif Erikson. But really the Viking, you know, age ends at this decisive battle of Stamford and another decisive battle of Hastings. And at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, which is also Chelsea, the football team's stadium, a Viking, who is it? Let me just, sorry guys. Harold Hardrada, King of the Danes, is defeated by Harold Godwinson. At the same time, right after that, William of Normandy, who's William the Conqueror, who is actually Rollo of Normandy's great-great-grandson, shout out, you know, Viking lineage, beats Harold Godwinson, and there is no more Danish rulers, you know, that have any claim to land in Viking society. So let's move over. What happened to the Vikings? Why did they leave? Some people say Christianity didn't really line up with raiding. Raiding churches as your main form of wealth generation is probably not a great way to do things. The consolidation of power with Norway and Sweden and all these other, seeing all these other societies gaining standing armies and really stratifying their warfare was kind of made the Vikings realize, look, we probably can't have little bands that go down and just kind of attack, monasteries for wealth. We need something consolidated, and we need a king to rule under, and we need to kind of mobilize our power. They never went away. They still stayed Danes. They still stayed Norwegians. They still stayed pastoral farmers as well. So, they just stopped raiding essentially. And then some people, I saw an interesting documentary where, clinker ships, the Viking ships are made with long slats, all pieced together. And as an army grew, these long ships literally couldn't, would wobble in the ocean. So they would literally sink. So they said, we need to, technology and, all this stuff is gaining so much and our population is gaining so much that we can't even do this anymore feasibly. So interesting there. Little bit of Brennan as well, did the influence of England, stop these kind of pastoral anarcho-syndicalist communities? I shout out to Danny. So let's talk about some famous Vikings with the little time we have left. So Ragnar Lothbrok, one of the most famous Vikings, everybody knows him. It's not even known that he's an actual person. A lot of people think that he's an amalgamation of a lot of, Viking kings, but he is, shouted out in the Siege of Paris. So there's a large debate about whether Ragnar Lothbrok's even real. The main reason for him being real is to legitimize the sons of Ragnar and his story about being eaten by snakes and giving a prophecy where he says, after he's thrown in the pit of snakes, how the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. So he's one of the most famous Vikings, mostly from the show because it follows his life. This is one of the most, crazy, bloodthirsty, ruthless Vikings of all time, Ivar the Boneless, and he was basically the leader of the great heathen army. And a lot of people say they call him the Boneless because he might have suffered from some type of congenital bone disorder. People say he was carried around a lot. People say he had brittle bone disease, but he was also described as a berserker. So nobody really knows a lot about him. He co-ruled Dublin. He blood eagled King Aila. So very ruthless, loved war. At one point, he just said, screw Dublin, I'm going up to Scotland to keep killing and raiding. So he's just this bloodthirsty, crazy Viking. Bjorn Ironside, another shout out to the show. He was actually another leader of the Great Heathen Army. He sieged Paris. He also said, I'm going all the way to Rome. We're going east. And he actually, there's an interesting story of him when they thought that they got to Rome. They sent a message that the king was dying and for the bishop to come out, and he was hidden under, on a bed, in a coffin and all that stuff. And as they brought him into the gates, he popped open and held the gate open for the Vikings, and they all ran in and took the city in Italy and said, hey, we got our riches. We don't need Rome. Let's go. He actually went on to be the king of Sweden. I'm a little over time. This guy's pretty interesting. He's actually a king of Vikings. He was actually he was the king of Norway, Denmark, England, a unified England, and some peoples in Sweden at one time, but got a little overextended. And when you rule 4 countries, it's pretty hard to keep them all under control. So he ended up dying in a battle that for Norway. This is Eivor the Wolf-Kissed. He's my character from Assassin's Creed, the video game I play that got me interested in Vikings. He assisted Ivar the Boneless at the Battle of York. He destroyed an evil cult within the Christian Church of England. His family was murdered by another Viking clan, and he went and avenged that murder. He set up an incredible settlement called Ravensthorpe in Mercia. Basically, this guy, Eivor the Wolf-Kissed, my character from the video game I play, was instrumental in all of the major things that I've talked about today. So you're welcome. Another major Viking, Kratos. He's actually the god of war in the video game I play, God of War 4 in Norse mythology. And he fought through the 9 realms of Yggdrasil with his son Atreus. He killed the god Balder. And also he possibly may bring about the Ragnarok. So we'll see in the next game. I'll let you guys know. Some couple interesting facts. I'm almost done. Sorry, guys. I know I had a lot. Bluetooth was named after Vikings. So Harold Bluetooth Gormson, because he paired Norway and Denmark. He unified both nations. So interesting fact. Aleikir was the first, mention of a blood brothership. So cutting your hand and shaking hands was almost deeper than any familial connection if you did it. And it's literally called, there's a Foster Brother saga. So it's literally Foster Brother saga. Berserkers were some of the most feared Viking warriors, sometimes ran into battle naked or covered in wolf skins or bear pelts in order to scare the enemy. Excavations of Viking sites have turned up tweezers, razors, combs, ear cleaners. So it's known far and wide that Vikings are actually some of the most cleanly Europeans in the Middle Ages. Also the access to, hot springs, just in the geographic area they are, let them, gave them the ability to bathe twice a week. This is an interesting one. In order to light fires, they would collect fungus from tree bark and mix it with urine and create like a mush and a pelt, and then wrap that around torches, and it would create basically a wick that would never go out. And they could, they could run with their torches and all this stuff. They developed primitive skis as a mode of transportation and recreation. They were the first freestyle rap battlers. They created a poetry called flighting, which was a poetic exchange of insults targeting cowardice or perversion. And they would bleach their hair, because if you were brunette and you weren't a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Viking, you kind of looked a little weird. So it was also maybe a lice treatment as well. This is an unfortunate fact, but only 80% of Viking children survived past 5 years. Due to strong pride, Vikings, they would either, if a child was sick or weakly, they would either abandon the child or throw them in the sea. And so that's a little upsetting. And the days of the week actually have their roots in Norse mythology. Wednesday is Woden Day, is named for Odin. Friday is named for Frigg. Tyr is, I believe, Thursday or Tuesday. And Thursday is named for Thor's Day. So interesting point as well. They've never had horns. That was from an opera in the 1800s that they started, that rumor started. And then the last Viking fact I have is during the 1998 season, the Vikings led by Randall Cunningham, Robert Smith, and Chris Carter, as well as Randy Moss, never scored less than 24 points in any of their games. So if you'd want, we could talk about the story of Ragnarok, but I'm already 28 minutes in, and so I'm probably done, guys. Thank you.
Great job,
right.
Willie.
Yay.
Woo! Thank you.
Absolutely.
And you got a lot of Viking lore.
Well, you guys wanted it.
A lot of Viking lore. Hey,
We
Will,
got
how
So
did you learn?
Chris
Will,
is gonna do the
Hey,
questions,
You will be
right?
muted, sir. There is a couple questions, or there are a couple questions. The first one's from Lita. what attracted you to learning about Vikings? Was it a class? Was it about women's rights? Was it about slavery and other cultures? We want a little background on how you got into it.
So I've thrown little shout outs throughout this presentation. All of these pictures are from the show Vikings on Amazon Prime, which used to be a History Channel show. And so it's eerily, adhering to these events I've talked about. That's the character from Vikings. That's the character from that's a character from Vikings. That's a character from Vikings. These two Vikings I've talked about are not real. They are video game characters that I played. And so that is why I've played these video games and I've always really liked them. And so I just in my free time have always been like, oh, that's an interesting thing I just learned. Let me Google that. And now I have a, useless amount of Viking knowledge through that.
Great. I think that covers the question. The next one is from Lita and Rebecca had similar questions. Who are the slaves and what comprises the underclass?
So yeah, a slave. I guess I don't need the slides. So the slaves in Viking are either people captured in battle and raids and brought back to Norway, Denmark, Sweden, or they are like if you owed somebody a debt and you didn't pay on that debt, there's a like a piece of you're called a bondsman, and you're basically an indentured servant, but it's not like, oh well, you're treated like a slave. Like once you hit that level, there is no coming back. So there's really two kind of delineations. It's if you've committed a crime that you owe a debt to that you can't pay, or if you've been captured in battle. And they captured a lot of people in battle.
Awesome. Danny's making a literature recommendations if you want to learn more.
I'd love to.
About Vikings. I guess at this point, if there's no more questions in the chat, you guys can unmute yourselves and ask Will something. Otherwise, I think Will, thanks for the information about all the Vikings. Yeah, I know you had one more story you might want to tell if people want to stick around for that.
Yeah, either way, it's totally fine.
I would just say, Will, there's some pretty interesting characters there, and I really like their hairdos and their beards. They're right in style with today's fashion.
The Viking look has definitely, come back. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite the guy with the shave, with just the thing, and then the bearded beard, and I mean, it's a good look. Are you gonna do some Viking look?
I don't have the hair for it. I can't braid this,
Didn't we see some of those guys at January 6th at the Capitol?
Possibly. Yeah. The QAnon Viking, he's the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're the wrong. I mean, Vikings were never that great of people, but they're not.
Well, that's what my other comment said, is like, we got a bunch of these people in Portland right now. There's like 25 of them. I mean, basically what you just described is they're kind of anarchists. They go into battle naked. They're just like taking over the world, and they don't really give a rip about the rules. So, I mean, we got a bunch of people like that in Portland right now. It's really awesome.
Hey, Will, are you there? This is Uncle Bud.
Hey, Uncle Bud.
Hey, I have a suggestion for your next presentation.
What?
I'm hoping that you could do a master class on Zoom and show us all the ins and outs of how to be like a power Zoom user.
I think I mentioned that, and I was told unequivocally no. So yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Why?
You've got a lot.
Something everyone can use.
You've got a lot of fans for this second talk, Will. I think maybe next time we'll get you lined up.
Guys. Like, oh man.
Yeah,
Doing more than making this, guys.
Go Will.
Like, why couldn't I have done that the first time? Then I wouldn't have to put this whole Viking thing together.
Yeah.
Well, we could do that. The next
I
talk,
thought it was really cool to learn about the Vikings. So thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
me too.
well, we have our own G Squad meeting in July, but I thought maybe we would do our August presentation at the family reunion.
Did you just say G-spot meeting?
Yeah, baby.
Oh my God.
It's so funny.
Help
Oh my
us. God
God,
help us.
You guys are freaking crack
God
at me.
help